So, morning everyone. My name's Rhianna. I am from the BECBC Shadow Board. Today on our podcast, we're joined by Gary Shuttleworth, one of the directors at BECBC. So, Gary, thanks for joining us today. It'd be great if we could find out a little bit more about you. Maybe tell us about your day job. So, whenever you're ready.
Morning, Rhianna. Thank you. Yeah. So the day job. Everybody's, I think, back in the offices, back around, and there's a lot more travel, a lot more face-to-face interaction. So the day job has now become, I think, a little bit more like what we used to do. But in terms of what we do, for Morgan Sindall, I'm looking at all of the opportunities that we've got, particularly around the nuclear business and the wider infrastructure, and how we can bring that to pass. So how we can connect that in, which is a great opportunity, I think, for everybody in the supply chain.
Yeah, great. So how did you get to join Morgan Sindall? How long have you been, how long have you worked at Morgan Sindall? Where were you before?
So I've been with Morgan Sindall 3 years, just coming up to 3 years. Prior to that, I was in Nugen, which was an ambition to build power stations on the West Coast. So Toshiba took majority ownership in 2014, and I went in as part of the exec to try and realise that. And then prior to that, I've been predominantly in nuclear and predominantly overseas. So spent huge amounts of time in all parts of the world. Doing uranium trading, been in part of the power plants business, fuel manufacturer at Springfield. So a hugely nuclear related background. But I guess the important point was coming back home to Cumbria, looking to do Nugen, and now continuing that sort of passion to deliver with Morgan Sindall.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously, as Britain's Energy Coast business cluster, I can see that's going to be a great asset for us. So really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Are you based in Cumbria all the time, or a lot of travel you've mentioned?
Yeah, I probably spent, so over the last 8 years, I've probably spent the majority of my working time here. And I think the nature of large projects means you've got to travel and meet people. And for Nugen, there was a lot around how to get the project financed. So you had to travel around to London and to other areas. Huge amounts of time in looking at the supply chain capability. So again, traveling. Rotherham and the Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre and lots of other facilities around the country that sort of stimulate the growth of the supply chain. But I'm a Blackpool lad, so I live on the Fylde coast still, not a million miles from Blackpool, and that was where I grew up. So.
Still northern, there we go.
yeah, very much northern, yeah.
So my next set of questions is just sort of about your role within BECBC. So just remind our members, when did you join as a director?
So I joined, or I was, I put my name forward and then was sort of voted about a year ago at the last annual cycle. And yeah, I mean, tremendous privilege to be able to be part of the cluster. I think the moment where we changed the structure of the cluster was really significant. So we've now got Diane as a CEO and a public face and leadership for the cluster. So really, in terms of the role of the cluster, it's twofold really, or maybe threefold. I mean, primarily now to support Diane, make sure that we can bring what's needed to help Diane deliver for members. Secondly, I think it's about making sure that Morgan Sindall is connected at every level, so that given we are a strong local player, it's making sure our business is really well plugged in. And then third fold, I think, is really about trying to understand where those next big opportunities are for all of us. Really busy sector in Cumbria on all kinds of infrastructure opportunities is really exciting times. So those three things, I think, is what I hope to bring as a board director.
That's great, thank you. So going back to the opportunities, then, what would, obviously specifically, what would you say is the biggest opportunity for either BECBC or Cumbria?
Well, I've obviously got a nuclear involvement. So if I start there, I think, you know, some of the activities that are now emerging through Sellafield's PPP program, where key delivery partners are being appointed. These are really significant 10 to 15-year contracts that allow a lot of investment and certainty to be committed into the supply chain. So that's a really big area around existing opportunities. What I really like, and we've been a big supporter of Reboot, which is an initiative which is now under BEC, as in the Britain's Energy Coast, or building and exciting communities, you know, the property owning BEC. Reboot is about looking at all the social value initiatives and also how to manage investment that local authorities would receive into local communities. So there's a big role there that some of those projects could be around domestic heating solutions. And so there's a lot of opportunity there, which is not an industrial level, but really important locally. And then I think as you look further across all of Cumbria, there's going to be a need for connectivity to increase around comms, so fibre network, around electric vehicles. So there's just a really exciting transformation I think we're all going through, and Cumbria is no different.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting. I guess on the flip side, then, what would you say is the biggest challenge at the moment? Obviously, we're coming out of a pandemic. What is that something that you still see as a challenge, or what are your thoughts?
So I think the interesting challenge is that at the moment there appears to be more vacancies available, roles for employment with the Job Centre and Job Centre Plus than there are people out of work. So we've probably got an unusual situation where there is enough work for everybody. However, we haven't got necessarily the right people in the right place to take those opportunities. So we've been working with Altogether Cumbria to look at how can we and analyse that situation, how can we skill and upskill and increase employability, and that's an ambition I think that a number of entities are trying to stimulate. So that I think is the challenge, because we want growth and we want it to be sustainable regionally, but we probably are going to run out of the right skilled, trained people to do it.
Yeah, and that's so true, and it's not sector specific either, is it? It's definitely a candidates market, which if you talk to recruiters is very, very rare. So yeah, really interesting climate at the minute, I think. I guess long term it'd be sort of upskilling or training the next generation, which obviously at the Shadow Board, this is something that we're passionate about, developing them. But yeah, if you look at the climate and economic climate as it is now, short term, how do we overcome those challenges? So
Well, absolutely. I think a massive commitment, I think, across a lot of the major players for apprenticeships and graduate apprenticeships and Centre for Leadership Performances, you know, is part of helping that progression and pathway for people. In the short term, we may need to reskill, and that may be that we've got a bigger opportunity immediately to take people from career paths that perhaps aren't as in demand across to ones that are, and they may be the short-term opportunities we've got to do more of. Plus, as you push out, we would want to make more use of talented resource pools like the autistic community, and we've spoken with National Autism around how could that work. So there are some other skilled sectors of the community that we could potentially be able to help gain employment.
yeah, really interesting. So thanks for those insights. My final point, just that we'd like to get to know you. So we're interested to know something that not everybody knows. So can you tell us something about you that's maybe a bit of a surprise that our members might want to hear?
Well, whether the members want to hear it, I think is a surprise. When I grew up in Blackpool, I was big on ice skating, so ice hockey. And then in a previous company, we had a facility over in Sweden. So I asked them, you know, could we go out on the lakes, which over there is a safe activity, whereas clearly it isn't in our country. And just had almost it's kind of a life fulfilling moment where I went skating out on the lakes at Västerås, just north of Stockholm, which, you know, it was just an amazing experience. Clear, crisp day, and away we went, and you could just go where you wanted safely. So yeah, I don't think many people know it, but there you go.
No, I'm sure they don't. And you might have had a very different career if you'd become professional.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
Thinking back then, is it just finally, I know I said finally before, but is there any advice that you'd have given your younger self?
Well, that's good. Well, yeah, that's a really good question. I think you do need to push yourself outside your comfort zone, which is a bit of a cliche. And when you do it, you know, you sometimes hit a good wave and sometimes you don't. You know, using the surfing analogy, I think you just got to keep getting back up on the board and keep hunting out those waves. I think your career is more interesting as a result of experiencing new things, but sometimes that can be uncomfortable. I think that'd be the, you know, stay strong, hold your faith and keep trying. I think that'd be the message I'd give.
That's great. So thanks so much for joining us today. I'm sure members will be really interested to hear your views on obviously the future of the cluster as well and Cumbria. So really, really grateful for you joining me today.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you, Rhianna.